Hello everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this session on the Early Language Support for Every Child, or ELSEC programme, as part of the Innovation and Impact strand, which is exploring emerging priorities and creative approaches across the profession. My name's Caroline Wright, I'm a policy advisor at the RCSLT, and I'm really excited about the presentations today, which are going to showcase this innovative project and share what the presenters have learned from their experience of developing and delivering ELSEC. There's some housekeeping. For those of you who joined us yesterday, this will be very familiar by now. We should have a few minutes for questions at the end of the presentation. So please do post your questions for our presenters in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side. And it would be really helpful if you could say if the question is for a particular presenter. Unfortunately, Gareth isn't able to stay on for the Q&A, but we can pick up questions with him after the session. You can use the chat function also on the right-hand side to share comments and reflections with other delegates. Please do be kind and respectful in all of your comments and questions, of course. As with all sessions, this session is being recorded and will be available to view on the platform after the conference. And you can leave your overall feedback on the session at the end using the feedback tab. And also, as usual, there will be a secret code for those of you taking part in the Challenge Hub at the end of the session. So that's all the housekeeping finished. I'm very pleased to introduce Gareth Jones, who is a member of the ELSEC national team at NHS England, who's going to give us some context. Gareth.
Hi everyone, hi. So I'm Gareth Jones, Senior Programme Manager for NHS England, working in Community Health Services. I'm a children's nurse by background, and an honour to be here today, and an honour to help support the ELSEC programme for which I adopted under my portfolio about a year ago. First slide, please. Okay, so what is ELSEC? So a couple of years ago, as part of the Department for Education SEND reforms, there was a test and learn pilot around speech and language therapy, which was developed by my predecessors, both between NHS England and DFE. And in essence, it's a programme of early intervention and testing workforce models for children and young people. Only in early years and primary school, although there is talk, and you're going to hear this here first, of whether or not we extend ELSEC or the principles of ELSEC into secondary provision. Obviously slightly different approaches, but it will be something we'll be working on potentially as part of further SEND reforms. So the point of ELSEC and the key aims are about improving early identification and support for children and young people, reducing rates of specialist referrals, and I think this is the bit that has got a hook for both government, NHS England, but also speech language therapists and services up and down the country. It's around sort of pivoting some of the notions of everyone needing specialist provision to think much more from a universal and targeted support offer. And then in turn, reducing risk of need. I'll come on to the findings in a minute, but that bit of it has really shaped some of our conversations nationally about what that means for waiting times and waiting lists when speech language therapy is one of the highest service lines across the country, next to community paediatrics. We also wanted to look at how do we increase resilience and workforce capacity by thinking about different models, and specifically using speech and language therapy support workers, and create a consensus around what training models should be used nationally with the support of qualified speech and language therapists to those support workers. We also wanted to improve the quality and the evidence base of this work, but also the data that we know is always a challenge across health and education, but also thinking about improving the join up between health and education, both from a national perspective as part of the programme of work, but also locally. And I think this is where, looking at evaluation, this is where ELSEC has really shown its worth in terms of join up, joint commissioning, and joint support. Next slide, please. Okay, so where's it happening? So there are 9 ELSEC Pathfinder sites aligned with each change programme partnership clusters as part of that programme. Each Pathfinder has been jointly established between the ICBs and the local authority, and the localism bit has really helped shape what is needed for those young people and those families in those local areas. So we've got, in region terms, we've got coverage of all 7 regions in terms of NHS England. And, you know, there's the list in front of you. We've got coverage in all those regions, which is good, because that might help us in the future with what might happen next in terms of scaling of ELSEC and next steps. Next slide, please. Now, this, bear in mind, whilst we started this work a couple of years ago, we didn't start reporting because of all the setup phases that were involved with recruitment and general setup. But since June 2024 to August, we've actually, and you know, it's the Pathfinders that have done the work here, certainly not us. They have seen 17,000 children at a universal perspective in early years and primary schools, 4,600 for a targeted support. Nearly 4,000 setting staff have been trained, and just nearly, in fact, it's over now 600 settings have been delivered. Bear in mind, we're only talking 9 Pathfinder sites in fairly small areas. But I have to say, lovely people, that we have just nearly reached the 30,000 mark for universal amount of children seen. We're on 27,000 as of October data, which is fantastic news. Sorry, we couldn't update the slides in time, but that data's only just come through from our Pathfinders. Next slide, please. So, as I said, we've been delivering across 12 local authorities, 7 regions, and we are just expecting a publication for the independent evaluation that is being done by evaluation partners in DfE, and that will inform future policy and investment decisions. But a few things, as we've already talked about, in terms of impact and the data, but it's about early intervention, and you won't be surprised to learn that that is a really key priority within the work, but also how we're working with those children and families. It's making significant and improved progress for children and young people in terms of communication and emotional regulation. The skill mix bit has added resilience, it's added capacity, slightly easier to recruit to that workforce group, but also what has happened is increasing staff confidence. So in some areas, 98% of parents feel greater confidence as a result of ELSEC. And in terms of staff feeling more confident in identifying children and young people with speech and language communication needs, it's about 85% improvement. And it has improved drug working, but it has led to higher than expected levels of unmet need because of the screening and the way children are being picked up. However, it has reduced specialist support from speech and language therapists in some areas from 44% to 23%. So it's really significant. The next steps of ELSEC are a little bit tied up with the SEND white paper and what happens next, but it's likely, I can say, that notion of PINS, which is around coaching for neurodivergent young people, and ELSEC will be combined as part of that white paper. The evaluation is due, the first evaluation is due any minute from the end of this year to early next, and a final report will be published later in the summer. That's enough about me and the national team. I want a big shout out to do it, DfE and Mark Rayner, who help support us and our delivery partners. But most importantly, our Pathfinders on the screen today and those that can't be with us. So thank you. And I'll leave you guys to explain the finer details of the programme. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gareth. We're really grateful that you could join us today to give that national picture. I'm delighted now to introduce Dr. Claire Smith, who is going to talk about the experience of ELSEC in Portsmouth.
Good morning, everyone. So, what if we were able to provide support for language for every single child, not just the children that are referred to our services or who we become worried about? Well, that was the exam question that we've been given when we were asked to be part of the ELSEC programme. Can I have the next slide, please? So, Gareth's obviously spoken about the ELSEC programme, but before I get going, I'm going to give you a brief summary overview of how ELSEC sits within the discipline of communication public health. I'll skip over the introduction to the ELSEC programme briefly, and then talk about what we're doing in Portsmouth with regards to our three main pathways. Next slide, please. So first of all, I just want to talk to you about the summary overview of public health. So public health sits at the intersection between speech and language therapy and public health services. It's been described in the literature for over a decade. Warren and colleagues gave it that definition of communication public health in 2024. But just a year before that, Christina McKean and Sheena Riley gave us a really helpful framework of services that should be included within a communication public health domain. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll talk to you a little bit about more about what that means. So McKean and Riley have described what they call a mosaic approach to providing public health support for children with regards to early language development. And they highlight that if you just do one of those elements, it won't meet the needs of children across a public health service. And that's because of the considerable variability that you get with language development in the early years and the intersection of risk factors and the child's natural progressions. So we've highlighted this in a mosaic structure on our slide. And as we go through the presentation, you'll see different tiles highlighted as to how we are trying to cover that public health mosaic. Next slide, please. I won't talk too much about this because Gareth has already covered it, but I just want to illustrate really what I've talked about there with regards to the intersection between speech and language therapy and public health. These two very large government drivers, the Best Start in Life kind of sits in the public health domain, and the Send AP Change programme sits in that more specialist domain. And ELSEC principles really do bridge the two, and that would reflect a communication public health approach. So the next slide, this slide covers the 5 aims which Gareth has already talked about, so I'm not going to go into that. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. So what are we doing in Portsmouth? Obviously, the communication public health approach really is focused on the universal and targeted support. And we work obviously in close contact with our specialist partners in the core service. The main element of universal provision, in addition to the public health campaign work that a universal service would offer, is the identification and screening of language development across the early years. So we start with that identification, and then children are then signposted to the right level of support. Next slide, please. So Gareth has talked about the new workforce, and I know George is going to be talking about it in a bit more detail. But just this is an infographic that shows our new workforce model for ELSEC. The little light blue ladies are our speech and language therapy assistants, supported by 2 whole-time equivalent speech therapists. And then we have some business support, and I share a role with a programme manager as the clinical lead. And we also have very, very close connection with our early years advisory team in the local authority. And the really important thing to highlight in the infographic is how embedded we are within the settings themselves, which is why we're all surrounded by buildings. Next slide, please. The other thing I really wanted to highlight is that we've been the development of our pathway has been underpinned by some core principles that we subscribe to. Following the evidence base has been very important to us, and evaluating our services and what we do to make sure that we are demonstrating impact is also important. So those top 2 stars are highlighting that we want to adhere to that framework, that McKean-Riley framework, and that where possible we want to use validated tools. So we're using tools and instruments that are national standard and validated either by speech therapy consensus or by the evidence base. Those national standards are also underpinned by community values, and that will be illustrated later on when I talk about the universal pathway. And we've worked in partnership, as have all of our Pathfinder sites, worked really closely in partnership with children, young people and the families in the development of our pathway. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk to you first about our universal pathway. This is more about the public health campaign element than the screening and the screening element, which we'll cover later. But I just wanted to talk to you about how we've developed our public health campaign message in Portsmouth. Our aim was for there to be a universal message that was really clearly understood by families, and that can be a motivator for families and professionals to think about language development and promote it. And in early co-production, families told us very, very clearly, less is more. So even 10 top tips, as we're quite used to, almost felt a little bit too much for families. So we showed them some different materials, and they landed on the National Literacy Trust's message, chat, play, read. Felt that was something that they could really get on board with. And we still use the materials that, for example, BBC Parenting, which was previously referred to as Tiny Happy People, or Speech and Language UK, have got other messages that we can use, but we use it under the umbrella of chat, play, read. Our objectives were that we would have a message that would have a Portsmouth identity that was co-produced with our families, that will be visible and present in the community, and will provide support and training to key stakeholders to help further spread this message. Next slide, please. So this is just an illustration of our co-production. The children and a very well-known street artist called Fark have co-produced our visual identity to accompany the chat, play, read message. And you can see the middle bottom picture there, a colouring in competition, which helped to identify the colour scheme that we were going to use for our bird. Next slide, please. In addition to developing this identity, our team have been present regularly at various events around and groups around the city, family hubs, a parenting network, which is a voluntary sector organisation, libraries, and ad hoc local engagement events. We evaluated our visual identity and the message in the summer. We interviewed 100 parents, and we got a really strong positive response to both the image and the message. It was clearly understandable, and around 66% of families said that they would do something differently as a result of seeing the image. And the other really nice thing was that professionals told us that because of this, the recognition of Fark as an artist and this really fun bird, that they were inspired to talk more about language development when they were working with families. Next slide, please. And we've had some really lovely serendipitous outcomes as well, which were unexpected. So our stakeholders across Portsmouth have just run with the message, not asked permission, just gone with it. And we've had pop-up street art, as illustrated in the left picture. And one thing that I was so excited about was the Portsmouth Music Hub independently went off, worked with some schools and developed a chat, play, read rap, which we are now going to play for you.
Listen up, Portsmouth parents, now let's be clear. We've got a little secret that'll bring you near to a world of learning with lots of fun, so it's time to join in. Yes, everyone. It's about an initiative called Chat, Play, Read, giving your child all the tools they need. Because it's not about money or toys or a show, it's about those moments that will help them grow. So chat to your child every single day. The words that you say will help them learn and play. Ask them questions, hear what they say, which will build their skills in a major way. Chat, play, read, now that's the key, so that every child can grow and be so smart and confident and full of cheer. Let's make their future so bright and clear. It's called Chat, Play, Read. Chat, Play, Read. It's called Chat, Play, Read, giving your child all the tools they need. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. All those moments that will help your children grow. Now let's get to play, it's a lot more fun. Building their brains till the day is done. Let imagination run wild and free. Games can spark creativity. It's time for you to read, so grab a book. Open up the pages and take a look. Reading together makes stories your own, and that's where ideas can start to grow. You're the very first teacher, yes, it's true, and every kid's a chance to see breakthroughs. The future's bright and it's in your hands. With you by their side, your child can take a stand. Chat, play, read is the way to go. Give your child a start and watch them grow. So start right now, don't be late. Chat, play, read is simply great. It's called Chat, play, read. Chat, play, read. It's called Chat, Play, Read, giving your child all the tools they need. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. It's called Chat, Play, Read, you know. All those moments that will help your children grow. Chat, Play, Read. Chat, Play, Read. Chat, Play, Read. See? As easy as that.
So now I want to talk to you about our second pathway, which is the 2-year pathway. And this dovetails with our family hubs and 0 to 19 health visiting service, and coincides with their 2-year monitoring of language development. So if they can carry out a language review, a health review at 2 and an ELIM, and have concerns about speech and language only, then parents can come along to a speech and language therapy screening assessment at one of our family hubs. It's a drop-in. And then from that drop-in, following a brief assessment, families can be either given advice and recommendations. If needed, they will be referred to the core speech and language therapy service, or if targeted support is indicated, they're offered one of 2 validated groups depending on their profile of risk. So lower risk families will attend a PEEP group, and more children with a higher profile of risk will have a Hannon intervention. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly go through these evaluation slides. So this is an evaluation of the drop-in. You can read the comments, but basically families find the drop-in very supportive and really helps to reduce their levels of anxiety about their child's development. And then the next slide shows a few comments that we've had from parents about the groups, really helping them to understand the strategies and techniques that they can use to support children's language development. We are continuing to evaluate that pathway with language outcomes, but unfortunately I don't have the outcomes yet, so I can't share them with you. So if we can go on to the next slide, I'm going to talk about our main pathway, which is the monitoring and intervention programme. And this is this is really focused at children aged 3 to 5. And we're working in partnership with early years settings and nurseries, so reception classes and nurseries. And the infographic shows there how we work. We're designed to work with a reception class and the nurseries that feed into that reception as kind of one unit. We've identified 26 settings in scope, 10 year R provisions and their feeder nurseries. And we've used a targeted selective approach, as you can see on the little mosaics there, by identifying the schools that had the lowest early years foundation stage profile outcomes before the beginning of the programme. We also have some early adopters too. We're using the Wellcome toolkit, the Wellcome screening assessment, to screen children, and then the intervention is either the Wellcome Big Book of Ideas or Early Talk Boost, again based on the profile of risk that the child presents. So if we can go on to the next slide, I can give you some outcomes there. If we say that we're going to support every child, we need to be able to measure to what degree we're seeing the children we thought we were going to see. And so we've measured reach of our screening, and we've been able to screen 98% of our target population. And as you can see there, the majority of those children were screened through the Wellcome screen. 98 children also had a speech therapy assessment because they weren't able to access the screen. You can also see that the pie chart has identified a very high level of need. The Wellcome tool has self-reported that it does identify a higher level of need than its a validated comparator. So we're aware of that, and we've kind of put a framework around the Wellcome assessment that enables clinical oversight, supervision and support from the speech and language therapists to ensure that the children are offered the right support. So you'd be relieved to know that all those red children are not going to the speech therapy service. I'll go on to the next slide for time. So this slide really is about the children where we identified targeted support. That's why the first pie chart only shows red and amber, because the green children obviously would be signposted to universal. And the pie charts show the pre and post outcomes before and after the targeted intervention. And you can see some real improvements there in children's screening outcomes. If we go to the next slide, I just want to show you a slightly different way we've looked at this. So obviously a child might have been read pre and still read post, but have made progress. And one thing the Wellcome screening assessment advises is that you screen down to their baseline level. So we wanted to look at how many children have made, how many levels of progress have children made. And over half of the children had made over two levels of progress, which indicated that they were catching up and it wasn't just age-related maturation. If we go on to the next slide, because I'm aware that I haven't got a great deal of time left. Talked about engagement with families, we've talked about engagement with children and parents. We've engaged with children, again, directly using talking mats about their experiences of our pathway. And so they've been able to tell us what they've enjoyed and what they haven't enjoyed about the Early Talk Boost programme. And it's been very, very largely positive. But they have been honest and told us little bits that they found boring, which I find encouraging, actually, that we are getting some negative feedback, because it shows us that they are actually able to tell us what they think. Next slide, please. So the only thing I really wanted to highlight really was, and in addition to all that quantitative evaluation, we have done something called a realist evaluation. We have carried out a focus group with our own staff and then interviewed 15 early years practitioners, because we need to know what factors are going to help them to embed this in the longer term, and particularly as we withdraw our support. And there were two really key themes that I wanted to just highlight today. One is this idea of shared accountability. So instead of a traditional transactional approach, which is we do this, you do this, we'll do this bit, you do this bit, we've actually both jointly, the ELSEC team and the early years team are jointly accountable for the whole pathway. And that's been really beneficial, because where settings have struggled either with staffing or safeguarding needs, we've been able to step in and support. And where we've struggled, the settings have been able to support. So jointly, we've been able to make sure the whole pathway gets delivered. And then the other thing that has been highlighted, and that's why I've got this pretty paper chain on the slide, is this idea of a chain of support. So if you think about it, you've got an early years practitioner who holds hands with a speech therapy assistant, who holds hands with a speech therapist, who holds hands with a lead, who holds hands with the National Pathway Network. And so nobody is ever too far away from getting answers to the questions they have. So final slide. I just want to highlight the limitations of our pilot. We're aware that the 2-year pathway had limited reach. There'll be many, many more children who could benefit from that. So it's something that we do need to address. I highlighted that the Wellcome is known for slightly over-identifying need. So we do feel that there needs to be further research on validating good monitoring tools, particularly at the 3-year and 4-year ages. And also, because we've gone for a proof of concept approach, we've actually delivered quite intensive support. So that is going to have an impact on how we then take our next steps and roll out our offer. But in conclusion, we've offered a mosaic of public health approaches in line with the McKean and Riley framework, and we've demonstrated that that can have an impact at a population level. And we've really benefited from learning from other Pathfinder sites. So I will mention Barnet in a minute, because that's been one of the Pathfinders that we're really learning from. But also we've learned from Bradford, who've really been able to guide us on how to support children with English as an additional language. So in terms of next steps, we're continuing to embed our strategic commitment to communication public health. We now need to think about changing our offer to a long-armed offer, and we're talking to Barnet and learning from them about what they've done. And we have an intention also to think about that targeted, selected approach where we go for supporting populations at higher levels of risk. We have an intention to move towards linking data between health and education, because we hope that that will help us to do that. So next slide. That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Claire. Really brilliant to hear about all the work that you've been doing in Portsmouth, and absolutely love the wrap. I think the campaign for Christmas #1 starts here. I'm very pleased now to introduce Georgia Ruskin and Marie England, who are going to share their learning from ELSEC in Barnet.
Thank you, Caroline. It was great to hear from Claire this morning about how ELSEC is being rolled out across Portsmouth. We are going to talk about not so much our programme in Barnet, more so how we've supported the assistants. We do want to note that our programme, as Claire's mentioned, is quite different to Portsmouth. If you want to find out more about our programme, please feel free to get in touch with us, but we're on limited time today. So why have we called this talk Flipping the Script? Most people would believe that a speech and language therapy assistant assists a therapist and their work. However, in ELSEC, we have flipped this idea. We work on the basis that the therapist's role is to assist the assistants in their work. We do want to note that ELSEC does not replace specialist SLT support. It's about rethinking the roles, not replacing one with the other. And today we're going to talk about how we support assistants in Barnet. So to give a little bit of context, at the beginning of their input, we trained teaching staff to screen all the children in their class using our locally devised screening tool. As you can see, almost half of the children were presenting with a level of speech, language and communication needs. And 33% of children were identified with amber needs, mild to moderate needs. And we particularly valued screening for identifying those children. We know that children with mild to moderate needs are often overlooked or missed and do not have avenues of support open to them, and they wouldn't meet threshold for speech and language therapy. We know if we continue to miss these children, the gap for them widens, and with no intervention, they are likely to slip into that red category and have significant needs as they get older. In ELSEC, we sought to identify these children and put the support in place for them early to prevent this, and we were working at the universal and targeted level. So a quick overview about our programme. As I've said, at the beginning of the year, staff screened the children in their class and we provided communication environment support. To incentivise settings to complete their screening, we allocate intervention support depending on when the screeners are completed. Settings then receive 5 visits over a half term from a speech and language therapy assistant, with oversight from a speech and language therapist, myself and Marie. An incredibly important part of our model is our follow-up visits. Research demonstrates that providing support, whether it's one-off or multiple sessions, is not effective unless the support is followed up. We found that by providing follow-up visits, this encourages staff to continue providing support and to remain confident when new challenges arise. Additionally, our model of providing a block of support and follow-up visits has meant that we've been able to provide support to a huge number of settings, and we'll share some of those numbers later on.
Okay, so that's a little bit about our project and what it's about. A big part of ELSEC was the use of assistant time. So we're now going to focus more on our team and particularly our speech therapy assistants. So this was our structure during our pilot year. So we had Georgia as our Band 8 clinical coordinator, me as the Band 7 speech and language therapist, and then we had 6 speech and language therapy assistants at Band 4. Essentially, the role of the SLTAs in our team is to provide the day-to-day support for settings, whereas the role of the SLTs is to provide strategic oversight, lead on clinical decision-making, so for example, deciding which interventions are most appropriate for our SLTAs to model to support the children in the settings, and also to problem-solve challenges with settings. We provide a really comprehensive induction process for our SLTAs. This includes SLTAs completing a skills passport within their first week. So this helps us to understand the areas they're feeling confident in and the areas that they might need a bit more support in. The SLTAs also complete the SLC framework, which is a self-assessment tool that helps individuals map their skills, knowledge, and confidence in supporting children's speech and language development. It also provides a personalised analysis of current confidence levels and suggests next steps for CPD for that individual. The SLTAs also access e-learning modules. Thank you. SLTAs also access e-learning modules to strengthen their general understanding of speech and language needs. And we also provide in-house training on specific interventions that SLTAs will be modelling in their settings. And SLTAs also have access to external training. So that gives them a deeper theoretical understanding of the rationale for the key interventions which they're modelling, and they can then impart that knowledge to education staff to support them in their motivation and understanding to continue the intervention. So our training period for the SLTAs is 3 months before the assistant is working independently. We think that's a really good investment of time to make sure that SLTAs feel confident and happy in their roles, as well as crucially ensuring that they're providing high quality and evidence-based input to the settings. So in phase 1, which is around 6 weeks, SLTAs shadow an SLT delivering interventions, while slowly taking over parts of the session from the SLT to build their confidence under the direct supervision of an SLT. And then in phase 2, which is a further 6 weeks, SLTAs then work in pairs so they can support each other and provide peer feedback whilst providing interventions. The supervising SLT also completes a joint visit with the SLTAs to each of their settings to provide feedback, support and guidance to the SLTAs. And in phase 3, SLTAs are working independently with ongoing support in place from the SLTs, which I'll go on to in the next slide. So in addition to the standard one-to-one supervision, we also have peer group supervision for SLTAs. We also really encourage the SLTAs to be reflective in their practice, and we also need to have an oversight as SLTs of what's happening in each of the settings. So we've used reflection logs to satisfy both of these needs. So this is where SLTAs write a short summary of the successes and the challenges of each visit. And they also have an opportunity to flag anything that they'd like support from an SLT about before the next visit. SLTAs also have access to ongoing training opportunities to continue to strengthen their practice. So an example of this is specific training on coaching others, which was a really big part of their role. So the next slide, you'll hear a little about from our SLTAs, about their experience and which support has been most beneficial for them. I think we've got a short video to play.
The training which I felt has been most beneficial for me this year has been on specific interventions which we train staff to deliver in schools. During these training sessions, we would go over the rationale for each intervention and the particular communication and language areas that it targets for children. We would then go over the intervention itself, in which a therapist from our team would do a demonstration, and we would then get to practice delivering the interventions ourselves through role play. I found these trainings to be really insightful, as it was a great learning opportunity for me to develop my skills and to learn about these new interventions that I hadn't heard about before. It also gave me lots of practical tips on how to effectively train staff members to deliver these interventions and ways in which it could be adapted during sessions to suit different children's needs.
When we joined, there was also a period of 6 weeks where we went into schools under the supervision of a therapist, where we were able to shadow the therapist delivering the training to staff, whilst also being supported to gradually deliver parts of the training ourselves with the therapist they're supervising. This meant that there was always readily available support when we were having a go at delivering the training for the first time, and there was also a big emphasis on reflection as a group and independently. From this point on, we worked more and more independently, and so I think it prepared us really well as individuals for the demands of the role without being overwhelming.
This year, I've had a lot of valuable support in my role as an SLTA within the ELSEC team, including monthly one-to-one supervisions that have been especially helpful, giving me a dedicated time to reflect, ask questions, and talk through any challenges with a therapist. Peer group supervisions have also been great for sharing experiences in different settings and getting practical advice from other assistants. I've really benefited from shadowing colleagues and running joint sessions too. It's been a great way to see different approaches, especially before delivering a new intervention myself. Writing reflection logs after visits has also helped me to think about what went well and what I might adapt next time. Internal trainings on interventions and coaching skills have built my confidence and encouraged us to share ideas, whilst external trainings, including Word Aware, has given me a deeper knowledge of specific interventions and more ideas for delivering them effectively.
So hopefully what you've heard there is that different things work for different people. So having a multifaceted approach for assistance is really supportive in terms of their training.
So these are some of the headline outcomes from our project's pilot year. You can see that we supported a high number of settings, children and staff. And we were really pleased to see how confident staff were feeling to support children, to identify and support children. We also collected information on our referral data from last year. Last year, we saw a 3% increase in referrals in ELSEC settings. compared to a 19% increase in referrals from non-ELSEC settings. And we feel that this suggests that ELSEC reduces referrals into the service because staff are feeling more confident to support children. So to share our data, you've seen the pie chart on the left, and then on the right-hand side, you can see the children's screening scores at the end of the year. Staff rescreened their red and amber children, and the reason they only rescreened the red and amber children was because we know that schools and settings have limited capacity to do multiple settings each year. We felt that if children were green at the beginning of the year, they were likely to stay on green, and we needed to focus on tracking red and amber children, and this was the most realistic compromise. As you can see, at the end of the year, the number of red and amber children halved. This was fantastic progress, and we are really pleased to see this impact already. To be honest, our focus was not so much on reducing that need. It was really on training staff this year, as we felt this was going to have more of a sustainable long-term impact. So to see such a massive impact on children's scores surpassed even our high expectations. These are the key themes from the qualitative feedback that staff and parents gave us last year. Staff told us from an early point in the training that they were noticing an impact on children's language, particularly when using adult-child interaction strategies in the classroom. We did have one key challenge which shone through: the practicalities of staff and settings running targeted groups. And this was because of capacity and teaching assistants being pulled in different directions, meaning that groups were sometimes not prioritised, or settings would tell us during the planning stages of their support that groups were just not possible. However, often these settings found that the universal support that we provided was highly impactful, as well as being more realistic to implement.
So in terms of supporting our assistants, we've divided our key learning into 3 areas. The first is around recruitment insights. We found that making the format of the role clear at advert and interview is really important in making the expectations around the role clear. Candidates can assume that as an SLTA, they'll be assisting a practitioner. We've now made it clearer that in this ELSEC SLTA role, the successful candidate will be supported to work independently. We've also found that extensive advertising in a range of places, so not just NHS jobs, but Facebook, local groups, has really helped to widen our recruitment pool. We've learned a lot about training and support, particularly that SLTAs can deliver high quality support and increase the reach of our service, but that they do require ongoing support throughout the year, not just at the beginning. And we've also heard our team feedback that SLTAs value face-to-face opportunities and feel that joint working was particularly valuable for their own development. Our third and final learning area is around role development. We found that this model can work as long as the right support is in place for SLTAs to feel confident in what they're doing. We have seen that SLTAs can work across different levels in a school, so they can facilitate teacher involvement in support, as well as working as they've done traditionally with teaching assistants. But it's really crucial to have that teacher involvement as well, from embedding universal support and quality-first teaching in the classroom. We've also seen that SLTAs bring a wealth of experience to the role. Commonly, they've been TAs themselves and can offer insights for SLTs in that role, but they do benefit from explicit opportunities and encouragement to share their ideas. So essentially, building SLTA confidence does require time and ongoing investment, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. We do have a short video from our SLTAs about advice they would give. I hope we have time to play that now.
My advice to service managers considering employing SLTAs would be to provide clear step-by-step guidance so that they understand their role and responsibilities. Also ensuring regular supervision takes place to maintain quality, offer support, and provide opportunities for reflection and professional growth. That's something that I have personally found very valuable.
The advice that I would give to other service managers who are considering employing SLTAs to deliver interventions in schools and nurseries is to create opportunities for the SLTAs to voice their thoughts and opinions on what they think could work effectively or what they think would work better to improve the service. Additionally, providing as much varied training opportunities as possible will help to support the SLTAs to feel confident enough to work across schools and nurseries. For example, shadowing other therapists, training on specific interventions and doing role play together, and perhaps training on how to coach staff effectively. I think it's also really important to support SLTAs to continuously reflect on their work and to help them to feel comfortable enough to express when they might be feeling overwhelmed or dealing with any challenges from their schools or nursery visits.
Another piece of advice that I'd give is to give them as many opportunities to shadow qualified therapists or even other assistants. This is something that I really benefited from early on and something I still benefit from to this day. It's important to keep communication open and check in regularly, helping them feel valued and confident to deliver interventions.
Thanks very much for your time. Here are our contact details. Please do feel free to get in touch if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Georgia and Marie. That was really fascinating and really great to hear from the assistants themselves, who clearly have such a huge role to play in ELSEC. I think we've got time just for a couple of questions, I hope. So we've had lots coming in. One of the highest rated questions was around a concern about untrained teaching assistants screening children for speech, and what does this mean for speech and language therapists? Are we devaluing ourselves? Georgia, can I go to you for that one?
Sure. I think that question came through before Marie and I started speaking. So I hope that some of the information we've provided has given you some reassurance around the training that's been provided to speech and language therapy assistants. We do want to make it clear that in Barnet, speech and language therapy assistants do not complete any assessments. You talked about speech sound assessments. I can't guarantee about other Pathfinders, but definitely in Barnet, an assistant would not be expected to complete an assessment. Their role is around training teaching assistants to feel more confident to support children, and we really hope that we're not sending the message that we're devaluing therapists. We can see that there is a recruitment crisis with speech and language therapists, and I think if we send the message that we can only have therapists, that's not a solution to the issue we have with so many children needing support. We need to rethink roles and think about what support do we already have in the community that we can harness to support children and families and staff.
Thank you, Georgia. Claire, I'm going to direct this question to you. Somebody said, in my experience, there can be a high turnover of SLTAs due to the want to qualify as an SLT. Do you have any thoughts on how this could be addressed within the model, considering the extensive training of SLTAs that's required?
Yeah, thank you. So I'd just turn it and look at it from a different perspective and think, actually, that's a huge opportunity to grow our workforce. I agree with everything that George has said about the safety and parameters around what assistants do. We follow a similar approach. We have a number of our assistants who are interested in qualifying as a speech and language therapist, and I see that as a huge advantage. We can support their training and development. We can get them really interested in children's services so that when they do qualify, they come back to paediatric services. And actually now with the development and growth of apprenticeships, it's a really nice stepping stone. to make sure we get the right people in the profession. And it's not difficult to recruit to those roles. So actually, I think if we get some turnover in our workforce, that's not a problem.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm afraid we are running out of time, so I just want to thank again all of our speakers for the presentations today, and thank you all for joining us. And I think the number will be coming up, the secret code will be coming up on your screen. Thank you all.